My name is Mathias. I'm a management consultant and a partner at Applied AI. And each year, my team and I will work with some of the largest OEMs, industrial manufacturers, and mines in the world. Anyone from 100 employees to billion-dollar companies, helping them scope out AI ideas from early stage use case discovery to implementation of sophisticated AI models that often leads to results on the bottom line. I'm making this video to help those of you who have a lot of ideas, but no concrete way of turning those into actual AI use cases that you believe are valuable and that can be turned into actual solutions because they are technically feasible today. We're doing this in an online tool that we have built. Basically, the workshop, the method, and the process that we help these organizations. I'll walk you through step by step how we do it. I even uploaded our playbook, and our hope is that you'll take a lot of ideas into concrete use cases. What I will go ahead and do now is that I'll share my screen and basically take you through this process step by step. So the first thing that you will see when you get onto this page is this landing page. So in the top left corner, you have a data and security tab. We don't store any of the data. We don't save any of the data. This is yours. You actually have the opportunity to, at a later stage, to log in and save, but we won't be looking at what you're putting in here. Before you click start the AI use case discovery, you can click this small button here that says download a PDF document. And this is basically our playbook that I personally use to run through this workshop. You click download, you open this PDF document, and basically what we're outlining here is the entire workshop step by step. And I just want to go through a couple of things before we delve into the actual workshop. So we do recommend that you set aside between 4 and 6 hours for this workshop. Bring in between 5, 10 people. I would say 12 people are the maximum people that you can facilitate this with. It's important that this is not a one business function workshop. So yes, you can do it just with IT, but that from our perspective wouldn't verify the cases at a point where you can build a business case around them. You would need multiple different roles or business areas in a workshop like this. I'm just going to go through very quickly the agenda and outline the steps. So basically you have in step 1, that's where you take a broad list of ideas, and then basically it's like a brainstorming. So you basically just put up all the ideas that you may have into the tool. In step 2, you prioritize these ideas by value. So oftentimes we see between 20 and 60 ideas at this point in time, and not all of these ideas are valuable. So what we want to do here is that we want to sort out all the non-valuable ideas. And we have, of course, in this tool, a way for you to do that. Once we have sorted out all the ideas that aren't valuable, then we look at the ideas that are left, so the valuable ideas, and then we sort these ideas by, are they technically feasible today? So we'll be asking questions around, do we have the data available? Where is the data stored? What is the quality of the data? And that's what we do in step 3. And then what you'll end up with, and this is what we'll do in step 4, is valuable cases that are technically possible. And then you may end up with more than 1, more than 2, maybe even 5. And now we have to decide which ones are we going to pursue. And that's what we'll do in the 4th and final step. In this playbook, you basically can scroll through and say, okay, I invite people into this session. I spend 15 minutes setting the scene, aligning on the expectations. And then you can basically scroll down here and say, okay, what is happening in step 1? And then you can use this playbook as a guide for yourself. We even have questions that you can ask in these sessions, in these exercises, if you need guidance running through this workshop. All right, so let's head into the actual workshop, starting by clicking this button right here. We are here again outlining the steps. All of this is what I already have covered. And then you scroll down to the bottom, and then you can see which describes your organization best. And you can pick between mining and heavy asset operations or industrial manufacturers. And this is also where the OEM plays in. So for this exercise, I'm going to choose mining and heavy asset operators. What you will see when you click this, it doesn't change much. The only thing that changes are the inspirational ideas that we give you upfront. So if you don't work in any of these 2 segments, you can still use this framework, but we won't necessarily have any inspirational ideas that you can start to work with. All right, So let's head into step number 1, and that is where we explore all the opportunities or the ideas that there may be. And basically what the purpose here is to come up with as many ideas as possible around where work today feels heavy, slow, where there's pain points or bottlenecks. This is the purpose of this session. And what you will end up with is a long list of ideas based on real work, and there's no judgment yet. So we basically just put all the ideas on a piece of paper. All right, so how this works is that you can add an idea in this section. So you can say idea number 1, or you can go down here and say, okay, I need some inspiration. And then you click on administrative ideas. And remember, now we chose from a mining operation. You can say, well, I think a good idea would be inventory optimization, because we have a lot of capital tied up in the parts that we have in stock. And I believe that this is something that AI may be able to help with. Or we can do customer prioritization or case handling. We can do an internal knowledge system. Okay, so we know that some of our senior maintenance or reliability people are retiring in a couple of years. So maybe we want to capture some of the knowledge and we want to do that. So let's go ahead and click that. And then let's have a look at the operational ideas. All right, so maybe we think that predictive maintenance across some of the equipment would be a good idea to work with. Then we can click that. And then we can go ahead and click, let's just say, drag line swing optimization, because we know that this is an area where even small improvements will lead to significant gains if we are more efficient in the swing of the drag line. So you can add that as an idea as well. How I would facilitate this exercise is that I would imagine that you are in a sitting face to face with individuals. I would probably break people out and have them note down ideas on a piece of paper. And then you collect the ideas maybe during a break, because at this point in time, you just put in the ideas. If it's virtual, you can either have people go to chat, write down the ideas, or you can share the link with them, and then they'll be able to put in the ideas themselves directly into the link. Again, 3 ideas is the minimum that you should add, but most of the times when we work with organizations and you bring these 10 to 12 to 15 people into a room, you would have between 20 and 60 ideas. So don't worry about having too many ideas, and don't worry about the ideas being listed more than once. Once we have added the amount of ideas that we have, we click this, use these ideas as a starting point. And then in this section, you can rename the ideas, and you can also choose who would be the user of this idea. So for instance, predictive maintenance, there'll be operations. Same with the drag line swing optimization. And the internal knowledge assistant, for this case, is also operations, but it also could be for HR, for IT. So let's just say this is for IT. All right. Then we click continue to summary. And now basically what you have is that you have a long list of ideas, still only ideas that you can begin to work with. What then happens in step number 2 is where we begin to pressure test these ideas. And the purpose here is that figuring out which one of these ideas would help you the most. So basically looking at the idea and asking, is this actually valuable? So the expected outcome here is to make the long list into a shorter list. So basically take away at least half of the ideas that you have come up with only ideas that are actually valuable in the business. All right, so let's have a look at the internal knowledge assistant and try and together do this exercise. So the first question that we are asking to the individuals in the room where we are facilitating this is, why is this idea valuable, or why does it matter that we are talking about this idea? And in the ideas that we have put in, we have predefined this because we know why this might be valuable. The ideas that you put in yourself, so that if we scroll down to the drag line swing optimization, and I actually think that drag line is in one word, we have added some guidance, but you would need to fill this out yourself. All right, let's go back to the internal knowledge assistant. So basically what we're saying here is that today finding information requires knowing where to look or asking the right person. This causes delays, repeated questions, and knowledge is lost when people leave. If this is improved, teams could find answers faster and preserve institutional knowledge. And you can add more if you think that there is even more that needs to be captured here. So once we've done that, so basically give a reasoning for why are we talking about this, then we add the business value, and we have a couple of steps. And the first step here is the actual value that we put some quantified numbers on. And we are asking the question, what kind of business value does this mainly create? So either we are looking at improved performance or growth, or reducing cost or risk. And from my perspective, this is definitely reducing the risk, all right? Risk of people leaving, and also reducing the cost of having us to go through answering the same questions over and over again. So in step 2, we are picking, is this time, money, output, or quality? And it can be more than one. And I would say, okay, so we reduce the time that we need to spend. We also improve the quality. We also improve the output. And ultimately, I would also argue that this here, we potentially would be able to save money because we won't make mistakes because we have the knowledge in the organization. So you can go ahead and click all of them. That's fine. This one is very difficult to quantify, so you don't have to do it, but you could put a number here if you said that this, if we solve this, then that will lead to X amount of money, hours saved, and whatnot. But let's just go ahead and say here that per maintenance manager, we could save 10 hours per week. So maybe that's a bit ambitious, but let's just say we can save 1. All right. Then the third and final step here is that's when we talk about the value scoring. So now we are trying to quantify the actual value. So what value does this bring if we solve it? So from a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 being the highest, we basically just drag and drop this chart, this bar chart. And then I would, from my perspective, say this is a 5. And the second question we're asking here is that the frequency or severity with having this as the as-is situation, we basically ask, okay, so how often do we go back to our managers and ask the same question? If we do that a lot, then this is a 5. Or if it's on the output and we say, okay, because we didn't ask this question, a lot of mistakes are happening, then this is also high. And I would say on this, it's probably a 4, because from my perspective, mistakes do happen from new people coming in and from senior people retiring, but it's not that often. So I would probably put it at 4. So this is basically one of the ideas that are now value scored, and you get a scoring. So basically you multiply the 5 by the 4, and then you get a score that is 20. So that is, from our perspective, a very high score. And then you go ahead and do that with all the ideas that you have listed out. And you can do the same thing for predictive maintenance, improve, yabba, yabba, yabba. And you cannot proceed before you have added in step 1, 2, and 3. So basically we have to put these in. And I'm just gonna put them in. I'm not gonna spend time doing this for the sake of the exercise here. And then what you can see is that you can now continue to the next step. So what we just did is that we took the long list of ideas, and then we boiled that down to a shorter list of only ideas that are actually valuable. And I wanna add a 2.5 step between step 2 and step 3, because if you have a lot of ideas, and this is something that we see sometimes, some of the clients that we work with, they have more than 60 ideas in this part of the exercise, and more than 20 ideas coming out of step 2. Instead of you having to run through the technical feasibility of 20 ideas, you can do a short pressure test in the organizations with the valuable ideas. So let me explain a bit about how that works and give you a couple of examples. So for one of the industrial manufacturing organizations that we work with, they were asked repeatedly by customers to do revisions on previous assets that they have built. So 5 years ago, we built asset A, $10 million to build this asset. It's very complex, bespoke type of asset. And then the client 5 years later would send a revision. So tons of PDFs, tons of Excel sheets, and basically asking for a similar asset, but with a lot of small changes. So the executives, they asked us, and they said, this is something that we spend a lot of time on, and we make sometimes mistakes. We build the asset, and then the client tells us that, hey, you made this mistake because we asked for revisions, and then we have to go and undo that. And we said, this sounds like a good idea, and it also came out as a top candidate. But they had so many ideas that we wanted to pressure test these in the organization. So basically what we did is that we took all the ideas, a piece of paper with all the ideas on it, and then we went out into the organization and asked the actual people on the shop floor, how often do you get revisions? That was the first question. And then the answer to that question was, well, not that often, because, we only build 4 or 5 assets per year. So it's not that often we get revisions. Then the second question we asked, how often do you make mistakes in these revisions? The answer to that question was not that often, because we are very thorough in how we, read through these revisions. And then that led us to the third question, and that was, how long do you spend reading through these revisions? And the answer to that question was a couple of hours. But then the conclusion was, if you only spend a couple of hours, you hardly ever make any mistakes, and it's only happens 5 times a year. Why are we even talking about this case? Because yes, maybe it's valuable, but it's not valuable compared to the other cases that we brought through. So that's how you pressure test some of these, or at least test some of the hypotheses on the most valuable ideas if you have more than 10, more than 15 ideas. So this is not part of the exercise, but this is something that I would strongly encourage you to do if you have a lot of ideas. All right. Step number 3, that's where you test the technical feasibility of these ideas that you have. And the purpose here is to test what ideas are actually possible. And the expected outcome is to take the long list that was now a short list into a few ideas that are valuable and also technically possible. And we do not recommend for you to do this with all the ideas. So if you have 10 valuable ideas, you can go ahead and do it with basically your gut feeling of the most valuable ideas at this point in time. So let's go ahead and do this exercise for the predictive maintenance idea that we have. All right. So first of all, predictive maintenance is extremely broad. And I think that if you haven't defined predictive maintenance better at this point in time, this is the time you need to do that. I would recommend you to, if this is a high value idea, that you go back and click and basically iterate the predictive maintenance idea a little bit here at this point in time, because if it's too broad talking predictive maintenance, so it can either be predictive maintenance for a certain type of asset. So it can either be for haul trucks, it could be for drag lines, it could be for trains, whatever. That's not important at this point in time, but you need to define what is the piece of asset that you are talking about at this point in time. Or it can be for the mobile fleet or the plant, whatever. You get what I'm saying here is that you need to narrow it a bit down, because it's difficult to say predictive maintenance for the entire mine. That's an impossible task to comprehend the complexity of that. So we'll go ahead and write haul trucks, and then you can jump back into the feasibility here, and then you can say predictive maintenance, and now you know it's for the haul trucks. At this point in time, if you didn't have individuals in the exercise who are specialized in that piece of equipment or in that part of the business, I would strongly recommend you to bring those individuals into the workshop. Again, you can save the progress, and then you can pick up where you left off a couple days out. But it's extremely important when you are going from ideas that are valuable to now you're beginning to turn these ideas into actual use cases, that you bring the experts into this part of the exercise if they aren't in the room already. Okay, so let's try and walk through this part of the exercise. So the first question that we ask you here is that, do you have the data needed today? And this is a difficult question to answer, but you need to answer this question. So what do we mean by that? Is that the information exists somewhere in the organization, even though if it's messy or spread across systems. That's not what we're asking here. We're just asking, do you have the information available? And for the predictive maintenance for a certain piece of equipment at a mine, in this instance, a haul truck, most of the information from our point of view, most of the data is actually available. So you have oil samples that you do, even some of you are doing it on a daily basis. some doing on a weekly basis. You have filter analysis, and most of you also have telemetry data, either from CAD equipment, Komatsu equipment, in Vision Link, or in third-party sensors. You're collecting a lot of this data today. So from my point of view, answering, do we have the data needed today? The answer would be yes, even though that if you don't collect filter analysis or you don't collect telemetry data, you still have some data available. So you go ahead and put a 5-year. As long as you collect some kind of data, I would put 5-year, because we're not asking about, is the data at this point in time perfect? How is it structured? We're just asking, is the data available? Can we get it? The next question is, how usable is the data in practice? And this is where we get more into the quality of the data. And I think that at this point in time, we're asking, if people are already relying on it, is it usable, or is the quality high? And this is a difficult question to answer if you are not the expert, right? Because you wouldn't know the answer to this question. But from a predictive maintenance perspective on haul trucks at mines, I would say that the data is usable, but the trust and the quality of the data is not that high. From what we have seen is that we get a lot of oil samples, but the grading on the oil samples are somewhat interpreted by the operator or the maintenance reliability managers on shift. So even though you get an A, B, or C grading, there's a manual interpretation to that grading. And from what we have seen on the telemetry data, you get most of the mines that we work with get so much data that they actually alert fatigue, and it's still up to the individual operator to make a decision based on not only the telemetry data, but a lot of the other data that is available. So in and of itself, the sources aren't really that usable or trustworthy. So I would probably go ahead and add a 4 or maybe even a 3 at this point in time. The third question that we get is, how complex is the system landscape evolved? And still, we're doing the predictive maintenance case at this point in time. I would say that the system landscape is quite complex, but not too complex. And what do I mean by that? Is that most of the oil samples that you receive, they are shared in an email, or there's an API from the lab till some sort of BI that was built for the mine. Telemetry data is collected either through Vision Link or in other databases. And from what we have seen, most of this data is quite accessible. So I would go ahead and put probably a 5-year. That is actually 1 or 2 primary systems, maybe even 3. But at this point in time, we are all good. All right. The fourth and final questions that we ask here is ownership clear enough to move forward? And basically, we're asking 2 questions here. Who owns the data? And do we have an individual who would like to own this solution if we are proceeding? And I think ownership of the data for a predictive maintenance case is quite clear, right? So it's the GM in the mine, it's the reliability and maintenance engineers who own the data. And from our learning, working with these individuals, there is a clear mandate if you are proceeding with a case like this, because this is the backbone of the decisions that are being made in the mines. You can add, if you have any known constraints or risks, you can add them here as well. So maybe, again, this is from a lived experience, maybe you would say, maybe it will be difficult to get the data from the lab, or maybe the Vision Link API is not, well, this is actually, so for one of the OEMs that we are working with, they work with the Faro scene. So they have these 3D scanners that they set up in the mines to scan the assets, so the mill liners and the crushers. And they do that to make recommendations on both the inside of the crushers to optimize the mantle and the sides of the crusher and the liners, but also to understand the lifetime of the asset. And I know that Ferrocene, they shut down or they closed off the API because they want to do this internally. So that is a known constraint if you're working with some of these third-party 3D scanners that you can put in here. I think that for the predictive maintenance case, it's not that I don't see many other constraints. One final, maybe let me just revisit the data needed today, because I think I missed a key data source. So we talked about the oil samples, we talked about telemetry data, but a key source that I left out here is the expert knowledge sitting in the heads of the operators, the reliability, and the maintenance engineers. And of course, you also do have access to this data. No, it's not captured. No, it's not written down, but you do have access to this data for a case like this. All right, so we're not going to do this with the other cases, because then this video will be even longer. But if you have a case in mind that you would like to see me run through, I'm more than happy to do a video on that exact case. You can basically go ahead and share the case with me. I'll go ahead and do the video with the questions that I would ask. All right, so what you have now is that you took the long list of ideas, you boiled that down to a short list of ideas by evaluating the value. And now what you just did is that we evaluated the technical feasibility of these ideas. So what you will end up with is a 2x2. So a matrix here that on one graph you have the business value and the other one is technical feasibility. And then we have divided these quadrants into 4 different quadrants. So on the top right, you have low-hanging fruits, high value, easy to implement. That's probably not the right wording, but high value and technical feasibility. So nothing is easy here, but it's doable. And then you have the longer term strategic cases. So high value, but lower feasibility today. You also have a quadrant here that is do not prioritize. And then you have potential quick wins, lower value, but high feasibility. And of course, as you probably have guessed already, is that our recommendation would most likely be to focus on the low-hanging fruits, because why not? All right, if basically no decisions at that point in time, it's just a summary of what you have done, and then you press this button, and that's the 4th and final step, and that will get you into decide what to do next. And what the purpose is here is to decide what to focus on first. And the expected outcome is a clear choice on where to start now, what to prepare for later, and what to park for now. So you basically scroll down here, and then you would have your cases. So the knowledge assistant, predictive maintenance, and the dragline swing optimization. You have your value, you have your technical feasibility for all of these cases that you've done in the exercise. And then you go ahead and say, okay, I think that highest value and technical feasibility, that's what we'll be starting on now, and also why. So you give another sort of reasoning for why have you chosen this. So imagine that you have 6 cases that are valuable and also technical feasible. You're not going to proceed with all of them. So you want to provide the reasoning for why you chose what you chose. So I'll go ahead and write here, why does it make sense to start with this idea now? And I will say, this is huge if we can solve it, because we want higher availability and lower maintenance costs. Sorry for the spelling mistakes. And we have a lot of data and clear ownership, right? It can be anything that you put in here. But the reason why we want to put this in here is that once you are done with this exercise, you can basically export this as a PDF report, and then you can write in your company name. You can write company XYZ, discovery workshop, AI, what date it was, who joined the session, and who led it. And then you can export this as a PDF. You can open it by clicking, and you can open it, and then you can go ahead and have a look through everything that you've done. You get an executive summary. You get your ideas mapped here in the 2x2. You have a section that focuses on what to start now, what is parked, and then you have an appendix that is full of all the reflections, all the notes, all the scoring that you put in here. You can either give it to your manager or a leader, and this is for a next step in exploring whether or not to pursue some of the these use cases that you have defined. So basically use it for understanding whether or not that you can get funding or more time to understand if these cases are something that you want to pursue further. And when I say if this is something that you want to pursue further, that is the next step here. So what this workshop and what these exercises are is helping organizations with a lot of ideas become more concrete fairly quick. What this is not a definition of the use cases. That is a next step. So at this point in time, you would probably have between 2 and 4 high valuable use cases that are technically possible. What you need to do now is to begin to define this actual use case. And this is for a second video. I'll do a second video on how we do this, basically defining the use case, understanding more about what would this potential solution look like, and building out a super short project plan for how to make this happen. And the way that we work with this would most of the time, I would say 9 out of 10 times, we do a proof of concept to basically building a MVP or a prototype of the solution to get to understand whether or not this is technically possible, but also to test and see if the solution that we built is actually valuable for the users. But that's for a second video, me explaining how to go about and doing that. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you find this tool valuable. If you do, and you end up with a couple of use cases that are high value, you're more than welcome to reach out to us to get these ideas pressure tested. And of course, if you want us to help build these solutions as actual prototypes or proof of concepts, you're also more than welcome to reach out. We are happy to do so.